Today I'm trying 3 tomato recipes from the 1970s. Tomato season is in full swing where I am. Maybe it is where you are as well. I think it's funny that during the winter, I would love to have a summer tomato. But during tomato season in the summer, if you grow them yourself, or maybe you are close to someone who grows them, or maybe you have neighbors who grow them, sometimes you end up with a lot and you kind of don't really know what to do with them. So I thought I would check out this book. This is Better Homes and Gardens, all-time favorite vegetable recipes. This was published in 1977. I thought I would pull 3 recipes from this book to try and maybe give you some ideas on what to do with your summer tomatoes. My first recipe is going to be for marinated herbed tomatoes. And this recipe, of course, starts with tomatoes. I have a few different varieties here, including that pretty yellow one. I thought it just looked really lovely in the dish. It starts with peeled tomatoes. So if you've never peeled a tomato before, this is how I like to do it. So first, I just boil some water in a pot, and then I score my tomatoes, drop them in the boiling water, drop them in an ice bath, and then the skin just peels right away. Now, usually for a marinated tomato salad, I would just leave the peel on, but I wanted to try it this way just to see if it makes a difference. You know, that's what it says to do in the recipe. So I've got my prepped tomatoes here. I'm gonna set them aside because really what we're doing is we're gonna be making a little dressing in a jar. In a screw top jar, combine oil, vinegar, parsley, green onion, and marjoram, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Okay, that's funny because I was like, there's no salt in this recipe. It's in there, it's just not in the ingredients list, so I gotta get some salt. That was gonna be one of the interesting things I was going to point out, but it's just there. I think people still do this sometimes today in modern cookbooks, but especially in vintage cookbooks, sometimes there will be additional ingredients in the instructions that don't appear in the ingredients list. Okay, so let's make that dressing. So I have a little jar here with a lid that screws on tightly. We're gonna move you. We're gonna move you. I have oil, regular, you know, vegetable oil. It did not say olive oil, so that's what I'm going with. I have vinegar. It just says vinegar in the recipe. It doesn't specify which kind. I went with red wine vinegar. I think balsamic vinegar would also be really delicious. Just, you know, whatever you have. I'm a big fan of whatever you have. Some chopped parsley, that goes in the jar. Some chopped green onion. I was a little short on my green onions, so I ended up using a few chives. I have some dried marjoram. I'm a big fan of this herb. I feel like maybe it's not as talked about or mentioned, but I think it adds a really good flavor. I love to use it when I make like meat sauce or pasta sauce or something like that. I think it's one of my favorites, you know? It's not like one of the popular ones. It's not the popular girl at school like basil or parsley, but you know, I think it's an essential to have in your spice cabinet. My salt. And now we shake the jar. Oh, it's pretty. It's nice. Let's get this out of the way. We're gonna bring back in the tomatoes. Gorgeous. I especially love them in this bowl with this like aqua kind of color. So now that this is all mixed, this couldn't be simpler. You just pour it over your tomatoes. Ooh, that's a lot of dressing to tomato ratio. I stir this a little bit. And this has to marinate for at least a few hours, if not overnight. I am making this in the morning, so I'll come back this afternoon and give it a try. I may stir it a few times between now and then. Here's my little dish of marinated tomatoes. It has been roughly 4 hours this has been in the fridge. So, you know, maybe the taste will intensify if I leave it in the refrigerator overnight, but I wanted to get this tasted today. Also, want to point out there's something in the recipe that I didn't catch right away. That is that you peel the tomatoes, it says nothing about cutting up the tomatoes into chunks like I did. So that either means that they want you to peel the tomatoes and leave them whole, which is quite possible, or they just left out a step. Truth be told, if I'm gonna marinate a whole tomato anyway, I'm gonna have to cut it up before I eat it. So you make your own judgments, you make your own call. I think this is fine. This is probably how I would do it anyway. Let's try it. I do think it's funny because with the tomatoes peeled and there being sort of an orangey yellow tomato and red tomatoes, it looks like watermelon and cantaloupe to me. Like you could really fool people into thinking this is a watermelon salad with mint, but it is not. Let's get I'm gonna try to get a small piece of this yellowy orangey tomato and the red tomato. That is really delicious. It's so simple. I wasn't sure flavor-wise how it was gonna go. And while I said I would normally probably not peel the tomatoes, I think it kind of enhances it a little bit just because that dressing, that marinade has a chance to really get in there. I love the fresh herbs. Glad there ended up being salt in it because I definitely think that that could have changed things as well. So this is a very simple dish. I'm sure a lot of you have made some kind of variation on this, so you could jazz it up however you want. You can add fresh basil, you could add some little mozzarella pearls, like those little fresh ones, that would be amazing. But this tastes pretty good as is, like straight from the recipe, with the exception of what I missed, which was not cutting up the tomatoes. I would cut them up anyway, that's just me though. Next I'm making this herbed fresh tomato soup. So this is not a creamy soup. This is tomato and sort of like chicken broth base. So it's not like a cream of tomato soup. I'm interested to see how this turns out. I'm melting a tablespoon of butter in my saucepan, and then I have a tablespoon of olive oil. I need to let the butter melt and I need to let those heat up together. And of course I am cutting this recipe in half. You know it's what I do. The butter is good and melted, everything's heated up, and I have some thinly sliced onion. And I just need to cook these onions until they're tender but not brown. So my onions, they have softened, which means it is tomato time. So I have a little over a pound of tomatoes here that I've peeled and quartered. If you don't know how to peel a tomato, just refer back to the part of the video from earlier. That's where I showed you how to do it. So I'm gonna add my tomatoes. I'm gonna mash those a bit with my meat chopper. I have 3 tablespoons of tomato paste that also goes in. 2 teaspoons of crushed dried basil. I have 1 teaspoon of dried thyme. You can use fresh herbs for this as well. I didn't have any on hand, but they do give the amounts according to what you're using, so fresh versus dried. Half a tablespoon of better than bouillon. You can use bouillon granules. I always have better than bouillon on hand, so that's what I'm using. And I have 1.5 cups of water. I'm gonna go ahead and add that. So now I need to bring this all to a boil. The soup is boiling, so now I need to reduce the heat down to low, and then I'm gonna cover it and let it simmer for 40 minutes. All right, so I turned the heat off on this, and this is what we have. I cooked it for like a little bit less time. I probably went around 35-ish minutes because I'm making a smaller quantity. So it was cooking down quite a bit because there was less in the pan. But it smells incredible. It's looking pretty good. The recipe says you can put this through a food mill or you can blend it. I'm gonna get in there with my immersion blender. I like this one. I've had it for a few years and it has a couple speeds. I don't need anything too complicated. And then after this is fully blended, I'm going to strain it. But if you have a food mill, like it kind of like does both steps in one for you. Before I forget to say it, the other thing I really like about this particular immersion blender is that it's like comfortable to hold, like the controls, sorry, it's hard to get in here. The controls are here. They're not like at the top or like in a weird place. And this was a recommendation, I believe, from America's Test Kitchen. That's, if I'm buying a new piece of kitchen equipment or small appliance, I usually check there first. I'll check America's Test Kitchen and I'll check Wirecutter, and then I'll kind of cross-reference the two and see if any of them agree on something in particular. Just a little piece of advice for me, like when I'm gonna be investing money in a piece of equipment, I like to get some reviews from those two sources. So if it were me, and I was just making this recipe for myself and not showing you all and, you know, trying to follow the recipe, I would probably eat the soup just like this. I don't really mind the seeds and things. I understand some people do have trouble with seeds and things like that when it comes to tomatoes. So I am gonna strain this, but truthfully, I'd probably just eat it like this. So I happen to have this strainer that fits perfectly on top of this 4-cup liquid measuring cup. I like being able to strain it into something that I can pour very easily, so that's why I'm doing it that way. Just kind of do this a little at a time, put a couple ladlefuls in. It's starting to kind of strain on its own, but yeah, you are gonna need to press this through a little bit with a wooden spoon or a spatula. So this process will probably take me a few minutes, but then it's all ready to taste and I'm very excited. All right, so that is the soup by itself. And I did want to save, this is like the little bits and the seeds and the pulp. Not a lot, but you know, if you want a nice smooth soup or you are making this for someone who has trouble with those tomato seeds and things, you know, straining it through a fine mesh strainer is the way to go. It helped that I took the skins off of the tomatoes before I made this because otherwise all that would be in here too. It says that I can return this to the saucepan, and warm it through. It's still very warm, so I'm actually not gonna do that, but I am gonna taste it a little bit because this is where you would add your salt and pepper. I'm gonna add just like a little pinch of salt and a little pinch of pepper. I don't think it needs much, really. Give it a stir, and I'll do the final taste test on camera. And the fact that this is soup makes this bowl very hard to tip, but I think it's beautiful. It's a lovely color. I put a little sprig of parsley on the top for the thumbnail, because of course I did. One thing to remember about this soup is that there's no cream, there's no milk. The only dairy in the soup is that 1 tablespoon of butter. I think if you needed to make this dairy-free completely, you could easily do that. Just instead of having butter, just use olive oil to saute your onions. Ready to give this a taste, very excited. I did initially take that little taste without salt and pepper, and it was very good, but I did add a little pinch of each, so let's see what that did. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I don't miss the cream. I've made homemade tomato soup before that had cream and different things in it, and it's absolutely delicious. This is also absolutely delicious, and I don't miss the added milk or cream in it. It has a very good flavor, really showcases those fresh tomatoes, I think. But if it is not summertime, you don't have like decent tomatoes, you know, if you're craving something like this in the winter, I think you could probably use canned whole tomatoes and maybe just like adapt it a little bit. But this is so tasty. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, I'll stop talking about it. For my last recipe, I'm trying out these Vera Cruz tomatoes, and I think maybe I have mentioned this recipe in a past video where I cooked from this very same book. I have a couple of pieces of bacon here that I'm just gonna cook in a pan, and I have to cook these until they're crisp. A lot of times I like to cook bacon in the oven, but I only need a small amount and I need to save the drippings. So my bacon is cooked. I am draining it on some paper towels before I crumble it. And I have some of the drippings left in the pan here. It says to like reserve 1 tablespoon of drippings. I barely probably even have that much, so I didn't have to take any out. Bring some heat back, and I have some chopped onion. I'm gonna cook in those bacon drippings. I feel like the smell of onion cooking in bacon fat it just signals the beginning of something that's gonna taste good, right? So next I have to come in with my spinach. Now this is 4 ounces of spinach that I have washed, destemmed, and kind of cut into smaller pieces. And it looks like a lot, but if you've ever cooked spinach before, you know what's about to happen. I'm gonna stir that a little bit, and this is gonna cook way down, like to almost nothing. I have to cover it, and I have to let this cook for 3 to 5 minutes. See what I mean? It looks like there's nothing left, right? Compared to what I had. So now that this has cooked down, I need to add a few additional ingredients for this filling. Some sour cream. And I've turned the heat off here, by the way. And a few dashes of the hot pepper sauce of your choice. I have Crystal today. And it's just says a few dashes, so do what feels right to you and do what fits your tastes. And then I also have my bacon. I just need to stir this to combine before moving on to the next step. I have a couple of very pretty looking tomatoes here, and I have cut the tops off because I'm gonna scoop out the insides. I have a 3rd emergency tomato that I bought just in case, you know, the filling wouldn't fit in these 2. I think it's the right proportion. So that 3rd emergency tomato is probably gonna become BLTs for dinner tonight. Would also help if I grabbed my cookbook, right? Remove centers, leaving shells. So this is a very similar process to when I made my stuffed tomatoes for, I think it was my latest 1950s video. I'm gonna get a knife. These are so juicy. You wanna try to like get the inside out. You're just making like a little shell. I'm gonna try to do this seated as much as possible. So juicy, which is what you want, but also things are gonna get a little messy, aren't they? So I have successfully removed the insides of these tomatoes pretty successfully. I mean, they're not probably absolutely perfect, but I'm okay with that. And I used this spoon, which I've used before. It has a bit of a sharp edge, so when I have to dig something out or cut into something that requires a spoon, I like to use this one. You can use a grapefruit spoon as well. I don't own a grapefruit spoon though. And now that these are, you know, hollow, I need to salt the insides. It doesn't give like a total amount here, just kind of like what you feel is right. And now comes the delicious spinach mixture, which I feel I could probably just eat, right? I feel like I could make this and eat it as a side dish like cream spinach. It looks that good. But we're gonna put it in these amazing looking tomatoes, right? Yeah, okay. I don't think I need the third tomato. BLTs for dinner, here I come. I think we're in good shape here. I'll just pick one up. So I have cheese to go on top of these, but that comes in a little bit later. First, I have to bake these at 375 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. Then I'll put that cheese on top and let it melt for a couple minutes. Here it is, tomatoes Vera Cruz. I did snitch a little taste of the filling, and yes, it was as good as I thought it would be. I think you could just make the filling and eat it, if that's what you wanted to do. So I'm gonna cut into this. You know, it was pretty well it lasted, right? But now it's probably gonna disintegrate. I probably let these cool for like 3 to 5 minutes, but they're still pretty hot. You know, be careful with your tomatoes. Juicy, juicy. Okay, I need like a bite-sized piece here to go with some of the delicious filling. That is delicious. That is delicious, and it's something a little bit different to do with your fresh tomatoes. I would say get the best possible tomatoes that you can, whether you grow them yourself or maybe you go to a local produce stand or something. The tomato flavor like really complements everything. It's bright, it's tangy, and then you have that creamy spinach filling with the bacon, and it's just like such a good experience. Oh my gosh. Very delicious. Highly recommend that you do this. Before we talk tomatoes, I just wanted to say thank you. A few videos back, I let everybody know that I was very close to 50,000 subscribers, and I have reached 50,000 subscribers, a little bit over actually. And I know that that wouldn't have happened without you, my viewers, my audience, my subscribers. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming back and watching my videos week after week. This is a huge milestone for me. I didn't know if I would ever get here. And I mean, to be honest, I didn't even know if I would stick with making videos week after week when I first started my channel, but I did. I love it. I have fun with it. You know, and I'm very lucky that I get to do this. So thank you. Once again, thank you to my subscribers. Thank you to my audience. I really appreciate each and every one of you. So this book, Better Homes and Gardens, All-Time Favorite Vegetable Recipes, was published in 1977. I have cooked from this book before. I want to say that I maybe made green beans supreme, something like that. But it was another vegetable video, or like I think it was maybe like a Thanksgiving side dish video. And this is the second vegetable specific cookbook that I have cooked from recently. I did a few weeks back, I did a zucchini video because it's also zucchini season. There's a lot of them out there. And I gotta say, these vegetable cookbooks, these vegetable specific cookbooks have been wonderful because I think we tend to get a little bit stuck in the way that we prepare vegetables. And they're great. Like if you just want to like warm them up or steam them with a little butter and salt, like however you like to cook them, that's great. Sometimes you can get tired of that, right? And sometimes you have a lot of one particular kind of vegetable or fruit and you don't know what to do with it. You know, you don't want to cook it the same way over and over. You don't want to get tired of it, and you don't want it to go to waste either. And that's where these books are so valuable, I think, because they have a lot of good ideas in them. I love the way that this one is arranged because much like the other cookbook that I used a few weeks ago, it is arranged by type of vegetable. Vegetable cookery, artichokes to zucchini, so A to Z. How cute and clever is that? I love it. And also I love this photo, so you can see it. It's just such a beautiful spread. I see carrots here, I see squash, I see Brussels sprouts, all kinds of things. And I think there's really something in here for just about everyone. You know, it does start with artichokes to zucchini. Each section starts with a picture of that particular vegetable, but then there's also things that have been cooked from the recipes. So this is broccoli onion deluxe. If I'm not mistaken, this photo has been used in other Better Homes and Gardens cookbooks. It happens a lot. It happens a lot, I think, especially with the BH&G, the Betty Crocker, the Pillsbury. You're seeing some of the same recipes over and over, but that's okay. I don't mind it at all. I think it's fun. What else do I want to show you in here? My goodness, cauliflower recipes, celery recipes. I'm skipping over that chapter. It's not for me, is it? Corn. Oh, sweet corn is so good right now here. Oh my gosh. I had corn on the cob a few weeks ago. It was delicious. That's one of those vegetables where I really love to just like cook it very simply with butter and salt. Delicious. A layered salad I don't know if it's a 7-layer salad. I haven't counted the layers. It's called a 24-hour vegetable salad. Mushrooms, everything. And they have okra, just so many different things. And many different kinds of dishes too, from soups, which I made for this video, to salads, which I also made for this video, and main dishes even, which also I made for this video. So it's a lot of variety, you know? It's not necessarily that a vegetable can only be made into a side dish. You can make it the main part of your meal as well if you do it upright. Oh, I liked this one for garden stuffed peppers. A different way to stuff peppers, I think. A lot of times I think of the stuffed pepper as having like maybe ground beef and rice or ground turkey and rice. And this is really, it looks like it's all vegetables all the time. Spinach, just so many. And actually, oh yeah, there's a picture of the tomato soup that I made. I think that's a good way to get into the recipes that I made for this video. What a great bunch. These, honestly, they got better and better. I loved all of them. I started out with some marinated herbed tomatoes. The recipe did not say to cut the tomatoes up, so I'm assuming I probably should have left them whole. But as I mentioned, I would have cut them up. I mean, you're gonna cut those up to eat them anyway, so I don't think it hurt things too badly. This was very good. The dressing by itself was really good too. I think you could use it in this marinated tomato dish, but I think you could use it as like a simple garden salad too, a simple lettuce salad, because it was really just that good. It was so easy. A little red wine vinegar, a little vegetable oil, and some salt, pepper, and herbs. So tasty, so fresh, so fresh. And I chose to have a mix of different tomatoes in this dish, so it was a little bit colorful, because you're really, with this one, you're really kind of like showcasing what the tomatoes look like. That mix of like the reds and that yellow one. I thought it was a very pretty dish as well. Super fresh, super tasty. I think you can customize it. I think a lot of people have probably made a marinated tomato salad before, but often when I think of like marinated tomatoes, I think of like a basil marinade or something like this. And this was parsley and green onions. I threw a little bit of chives in because I was a little short on my green onions. And it was such a good flavor, a little different. I really enjoyed it. My next dish was the herbed fresh tomato soup, and that is the soup that is featured in this soup tureen. I can't say enough good things about this soup. I've talked to my friends about it. I've had texted them a couple of times. I cut the recipe in half, so it made like 3 nice sized servings. It reheated beautifully. It tasted delicious every single time, and it really showcased the flavor of the fresh tomatoes that I used. It didn't have any cream in it. It didn't have any milk, anything like that. The only dairy in this was a pat of butter mixed with olive oil to cook the onions. And I think if you absolutely needed this to be dairy free, you could do that. You could take that pat of butter, replace it with additional olive oil if you needed to, and it would still be absolutely incredible. I loved this soup. And in fact, I think I might actually make a full batch and freeze it so that when I'm craving that summer tomato flavor in the winter, I have something. It'll be a little bright spot, right? And the produce stand that I purchased my tomatoes from for this video, they actually sell their less than perfect blemished tomatoes at a lower price. And with this particular recipe, you're not really like showcasing what the tomatoes look like, right? It does not matter. I might actually pick some of those up and make a little bit of this for the freezer just to kind of like have that lovely summer memory waiting for me in the dead of winter. And yes, I did eat 1 serving of this with a grilled cheese sandwich. Great pairing. Finally, the Vera Cruz tomatoes. Another winner, another winner. Like I said, I think these recipes just kept getting better and better and better, and that was so delicious. I had the second one for lunch today. I reheated it in the microwave. It did not look beautiful. However, it still tasted delicious. It was so good. This is an instance where you want like really good tomatoes because it's the star of the show, I think. I don't think that this dish would be quite the same if you made it, you know, with less than stellar tomatoes. I don't want to be a snob about tomatoes here, but I can admit they're better at this time of year where I live than they are in February. What I have available to me, because I live in Ohio and we have all 4 seasons, you know, it's going to be different than what someone might have available to them in a warmer climate. And this time of year is the perfect time for a dish like these Vera Cruz tomatoes. They really just show off that delicious tomato flavor. Such a good contrast between that creamy spinach and bacon filling and the bright, acidic, slightly sweet tomato. This dish kind of reminded me of the baked tomatoes that I made for my 1950s video, I don't know, a few months ago. The filling on this one was a little different. I think those were stuffed with rice and this was stuffed with like that creamy spinach filling Oh my gosh, such a treat, really. And such a good like main part of your meal. If you want to add a couple of little side dishes with it, maybe showcase more produce from your garden if that's your thing. It's such a wonderful summer meal. If I'd been thinking ahead, I probably would have made them in the toaster oven because I made a smaller batch. I definitely could have done that. I'm not gonna say that I love tomatoes all the time. I'm rather picky about them, as maybe you can tell from the way that I'm talking to you in this video. I like them at a certain time of year. They have to have a good color, they have to be a good flavor. And sometimes if you just get those like very pale, kind of like not tasty tomatoes with a bad texture, like I don't like to badmouth them. I don't like to badmouth them, but they're not as good. And I almost feel like people who really don't like tomatoes, maybe they haven't had as many good ones. Maybe they've tried way too many bad tomatoes. I don't know. You're allowed to like what you like, by the way. I'm not saying that you have to like tomatoes. I don't like celery. I mean, I've made that very well known. But these dishes, oh my gosh, so delicious. I think you could make them for someone, especially the tomato soup, I think is maybe the most palatable for someone. I think you could make that for a person who absolutely doesn't like tomatoes, and you might just sway them a little bit because it's that good. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you to get out there, get to the produce stand, get to your garden, and harvest those tomatoes and use them in something a little bit different. I have a Patreon, so if you would like to support me over there, I'll leave a link in the description down below. If you love cookbooks and recipes from the 1970s, I have an entire playlist, and I'll link it in the description down below. Thanks again for watching. Thank you so much for getting me to 50,000 subscribers, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.